After doing 4 businesses that are profitable, I would say it's pretty easy.
And today I'm here with.
Tyson Batino, the founder of Scaling Your Company, which is a revenue growth advisory for the Japan market, and Smart Start Japan, where we help foreign companies
Mm,
set up their business in the Japanese market.
perfect. So, Tyson, why did you decide to start a business here in Japan?
I guess I didn't have a choice in a way.
Mm,
I didn't want to live in the US, and I was already here in Japan for 10 years, invested in getting N1 Japanese, and if I was going to make it happen anywhere, Japan is the place.
got
But
it.
if I had to think about it in hindsight, I would say one thing I like about Japan is that I can learn something that's being done in the US,
Mm,
and I still have like a 2 to 3 year window to apply
mm,
the same knowledge in Japan. But if I was in the US, like I would just have to study hardcore, making sure I'm always constantly at the cutting edge. And I think that's one blessing we have in Japan.
got it. Is that the reason why you decided to start a business in Japan instead of the US?
Not for, I just wanted to stay in Japan, to be honest. I
Okay.
really like living here. I've
Mm,
been here for 20 years, and I
mm,
think it's a really comfortable place to live.
got it. Many people find it difficult to start a business here in Japan. How were you able to do it?
So now I would say it's after doing 4 businesses that are profitable, I would say it's pretty easy.
Mm,
But I would say in the beginning it was a little bit challenging.
mm,
Specifically, I would say like 10 years ago, I would say finding a good business partner was really, really, really tough as a foreigner. But I think nowadays you have a lot of options. You can partner with other foreigners.
mm,
Uh, more Japanese people are open to it. So I
mm,
think now is a much easier landscape
mm,
for starting a business in Japan. And also nowadays, there's a lot more subsidies,
mm,
a lot more information. Back when I started my company in 2014, the only podcast was Disrupting Japan podcast.
yeah.
And so Disrupting Japan, but nowadays you have a plethora of options
Got it.
to learn how to create and more importantly succeed in the
Got it.
Japan market.
So, when you were looking for a partner or co-founder, what specific steps did you take to find the right one?
With the first business, they found me. So I guess that might be interesting for some people who are working in corporate.
Mm,
But I partnered with 2 Japanese guys. We created the English language school chain,
mm,
which now has, I think, 11 locations in 3 prefectures in Japan. I
mm,
think it's one of the biggest schools in Japan for adults
mm,
nowadays. And in their case, one person was a pro at marketing,
mm.
one person was a pro at helping franchises
Okay.
really systematize their process, deliver high quality customer service. And where I came in is they needed someone who could manage 100, 500, 1,000 foreigner teachers
Mm,
nationwide. And the reason they found me is I had previously managed 150 full time teachers for my
mm,
previous company.
got
Uh,
it.
was, did very well. I was a very good manager. And so they needed somebody who was basically plug and play. They
Understood.
just told me what they wanted. Okay, I'll make it happen. And they did have some very, I would call it not unreasonable, but at the time it's like, is that even possible?
Like requests?
Yes, possible requests.
Mm,
And I was able to make it happen.
got it. Okay, so let's break that down. First, it sounds like you were a corporate guy first before you started your business, right?
That is correct. I
Okay.
worked about 3.5 years
Mm.
for probably the second biggest employer of English teachers in Japan.
What made you decide to leave corporate life and start a business in Japan when you were already doing well?
It was while I was there, we surveyed employee satisfaction.
Mm,
I turned it from a 2 out of 5 into a 3.7 out of 5
mm,
without any budget. It was purely because I had no budget, I had to get very creative. Luckily, I had a very good supporting team of head teachers who helped me out.
mm,
But after we reached 3.7 and without budget, it's like,
mm,
okay, for me to take it above here, I might need a little bit of budget. I
mm,
don't think corporate is going to be helpful about that.
mm,
And so it's if I want to deliver the level of leadership,
mm,
company management, like
mm,
awesomeness
mm.
that I want to do, I would have to go off on my own.
Got it. Was that scary for you?
It was a bit scary, but luckily I was single at the time.
Okay.
I had about 2 years of savings exactly for something like this to do
Mm.
something rash and wreck.
Do you think people need 2 years of savings in order to start a business? And if they don't have that amount of money saved up, should they even start?
That is a very good question. I would say in my case,
Mm.
I definitely needed the 2 years.
Okay.
The reason for that was I came from an HR background, so I had no idea how to do sales, how to do
Okay.
marketing, or how to get customers. It was a lot of my thoughts were more philosophical. Let's
Mm.
say like how to create a good culture.
Mm.
But let's say when you're in a survival mode, culture is important, but
Mm.
eating is more important than culture.
Correct. Correct.
And so I would say in my case, 2 years was definitely necessary. But
Interesting.
nowadays, let's say with my third business,
Mm.
uh, I didn't use any money. And I would say in the first month, I made 400,000 yen
Mm.
monthly recurring revenue
Mm.
in my first month. And the reason for that was I knew how to do sales and marketing by then.
Because you learned it
Yeah,
already.
exactly. Yeah. With
Understood.
the second business, I learned how to do marketing.
Okay. Okay. So you have four businesses. I want to break it down first. So you started the first business. What made you decide to not just choose the first business, but then to leave it and start a second business that was not related to the first business?
Ah, gotcha. So I got kind of lucky in that the second business was actually a subsidiary of the first business,
Okay.
and
So what was the second business?
Japanese language school. And so at the Japanese language school, we decided one day is we have all this free space.
Mm.
We're not using the space in the morning, and let's say to be a good business person, it's how to, I guess I would say, what I consider a good business person is how they can use resources effectively
Mm.
because you do have restraints. You have a limited amount of time and money. So in our case, how could we use our physical locations
Mm.
to generate more revenue?
Mm.
And the idea we came up with was Japanese language school.
Interesting. So it wasn't even something that you had planned out. It was just out of maybe necessity.
Yeah, we thought that would be, let's say, I think once we started to thrive,
Mm.
then we started to think about the next business idea.
Got it. A lot of people say that when you focus on a business, just to focus on that one business and nothing else. But you establish four businesses. So what do you say to people who think that way?
I actually do agree with them to an extent
Mm.
because for my revenue growth advisory, I
Mm.
am actively advising 30 CEOs.
Mm.
And so that's actually a common advice I do give to some founders in that I think you have two or three ideas right now, but all of them are kind of mediocre. And so you really need to double down on one.
Mm.
And although it might seem slow at first, it kind of has a cumulative effect. So, for example, if I were to give my fourth business, Smart
Mm.
Start Japan, the incorporation one, it's I would say probably we've been in existence for about 6 months,
Mm.
but I would say probably 70, 65 to like 70% of our revenue
Mm.
has come in the last 3 months, not the first 3 months. And
Okay.
it just, just sticking with it. And then now people are reaching out to us. We're
Mm.
getting a lot more inquiries consistently. We know what people want. We know what to double down on.
Mm.
But if we had kind of go split our attention between multiple ideas,
Mm.
I don't think that would have been possible.
So when did you know to pivot to a new business model?
Yeah, so in that one, it's so I'll say probably one thing I'm really good at is making myself obsolete in my businesses.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is in the first company, sorry, the second kind of the Japanese school, the two people I train are running the business now. They've been running it for 3 years and they've scaled the
Mm.
business. But I gave them the tools, the thinking, the processes on how to think about
Interesting.
things.
Okay.
And
So let me ask you, when you started your businesses, and maybe this is a theme across all of them, but when you start your businesses, do you first think, okay, I'm starting this business, and because of that, I need to get somebody to replace me in the initial stages?
uh, actually, I would say yes. It's I like to choose people who are hungry, but for me, the more important point is someone who has low ego.
Mm.
And what I mean by low ego is sometimes I'm very direct, or I'm very direct just because I'm busy. Of course, I like to think things more slowly, but and I find that the people who can just they don't think about, like, maybe I'm irritated per se.
Mm,
They don't think about the irritation, like me being angry. They just think, what is he trying to communicate to me?
mm,
So they're really focusing on the message.
mm,
And I think if you have low ego, you have the ability to focus more on the message, not the deliverer.
mm.
Because you have a lot of ego, you can think like, let's say, you can kind of conflate it with the person who's giving the feedback.
Got it. It
And
could
so,
damage the
yeah,
relationship.
exactly.
Got
And
it.
so, like, for me, that's as someone who's doing, or at least now two businesses,
Mm,
I don't really have time to manage people's egos.
mm.
So I like to choose people with low egos and can then just pass it off to them.
Okay, you mentioned about how important it is to be resourceful with your time and money. How are you able to do that?
It's, I would say one thing I do that probably a lot of other people don't do is I do usually every quarter, kind of
Mm,
like a personal reflection.
mm,
Like, am I using my time wisely? I'll actually, for 1 week, I'll actually not down how I use all my time
mm,
and think like, okay, actually, I'm taking a lot of. One example is I do get a lot of people who reach out to me for advice,
okay.
and then I would have to think like, what percent of those people who I helped out were they worth my time or not? And so that's how I can kind of calibrate that. The other one was people pitching business ideas to me,
Mm.
and just was that worth my time or not?
How do you measure that?
It's one is I can just reach out to them, and if they're still doing it,
Mm,
that's one. Or another one is I tell a lot of people just reach out back to me in 3 months later,
mm.
and pretty much no one does.
Okay. So that's the way that you weed them out.
That's how I filter people
Okay.
out.
For someone now running for successful businesses, there's a lot of people who would say, I don't even have one business. How can I even have four businesses? What advice, what practical advice can you give to them?
Yeah, this is a question I've thought about because I'm advising 30 plus CEOs, and sometimes I do for short periods. Aspiring founders
Mm,
will just do 2 or 3 sessions together.
mm,
But if I have to answer that in a very nuanced way, I would say that if you're working in corporate, I would probably work, let's say, 3 days a week in the evenings, do about 3 hours. That's 10
mm,
hours there. Then you could do about maybe another 10 hours on a weekday. Sorry, a weekend day,
mm,
and maybe take Sunday off. And
mm,
so that'll be 20 hours you can invest in a business. And
mm,
if you can continue doing that for 4 to 6 months,
mm,
maybe you might get a few customers. And
mm,
then if that doesn't work, maybe pitch to separate to a different idea.
mm.
But if you are working full time and can do that level of commitment, there's a good chance you'll succeed.
Got it.
Or I would consider you worth my time.
Okay, okay, understood,
The
understood.
person. Another one is, I'll say if they're my controversial advice. If you're a university student, I'll say have fun. Let's say this is the one time in your life that you probably not have that much responsibility with. So when you become an entrepreneur,
Mm,
in my case, I have a full time employee. I
mm,
want to give him more money,
mm,
and sometimes that actually I don't lose sleep over it, but sometimes it I think late at night like, how can I make this guy more money?
mm,
And that's a lot of responsibility, stress. I would say even uh, like this last weekend, like
mm,
we just got back to Tokyo for 1 week in Hawaii, and we just had to spend all this time figure out how to find a clinic for my daughter.
mm,
And it's just like having. So I would say if when you're a university student, you don't have all this commitments to other people,
mm,
and so I would say enjoy it while you can,
mm,
and so you have no regrets. So when you fully commit to something like entrepreneurship, where it's oftentimes a lot about the people,
mm.
it's you would have done a lot of things that you wanted to do.
Understood. It sounds like you're saying that so that people don't have any regrets.
Yeah. So I think if was that when you have too many emotions, comp- when you do entrepreneurship to succeed,
Mm,
it really has to be in the survival stages,
mm,
making enough revenue to survive, pay yourself.
mm,
And then if you have other thoughts in your mind that are unrelated to that,
mm,
that is I would consider that friction.
mm.
And let's say when you're starting out in survival mode, you need as less friction, minimal friction as possible.
Mm.
So you need to be really fully committed to the idea.
Got it.
But I would say So that's my thought for university students. If you're graduating university, I would say if you have a little bit of money saved,
Mm.
then I would maybe consider probably diving into an idea for 6 months.
Okay.
Um, could be a
How
project.
how can they find the good idea to focus on?
It's that is a one is I'll try to get from their point of view.
Mm.
So if I was just starting out and coming from zero, it
Mm.
would probably be just going to a lot of startup events
Okay.
and just saying like, what areas are underserved right now? What areas are never mind. Oh yeah, what areas
It's
are
a tough question, right?
it's or it's I didn't want to give my secret, but it's yeah, try to find areas that are underserved
Mm.
and then just talk to people like, how much are you currently paying for this service? So I think the tricky part where people get confused is it's I'll say as a first time founder, maybe you should focus on something that people are already paying for something,
Okay.
but they're not satisfied with it and that you could do it better. I would say as a second time or third time founder, maybe you can focus on things that people they don't currently use it. It doesn't currently exist, and then you can ask them, how much would you pay for it? Try to get them to use it. But I think as a first timer, you should focus on something that's probably already proven, and
Mm.
you just do it better, and that will
Interesting.
increase your likelihood of success.
Interesting. There's a lot of people who want to start something that's new and innovative, but you're saying it's better to actually focus on something that's proven. Why is that?
The reason for that is I think as a first time founder, you don't have that resilience. And what I mean by resilience is when things are terrible for 3 months, 6 months, do you actually have the grit to not give up,
Mm.
not panic, not freak out? And I think and as a first time founder, there are some people who have that level of grit,
Mm.
but to be honest, it's rare to find a founder like that.
Mm.
And I don't see it too often. And
Why is that?
I think it's not something you can teach. Really, it's just kind of like your life experiences and
Mm.
what culminates into that moment.
Mm. Mm.
And so there are several founders I just see in Japan, like these are who I call the fighters.
That's interesting that you say that. How can someone know what type of founder they are? You mentioned a fighter. How do they know if they're a fighter or a different type of founder?
Ooh, this is a tough one. It's I would say that probably you in university you can kind of get a picture of it. Let's say in my case, I am kind of a fighter. So in my case, I went to a university where the level of IQ is higher than my IQ,
Okay.
and that was intentional because I wanted to be around people who was better than me to better myself. So in that case, I would say that's so I know I'm a fighter.
Mm.
For other people, it's let's say I'm trying to think of one that I see often is someone who they have a high IQ level, meaning reasoning, deductive skills. They can analyze things very well. But do they have the resilience? And so in that case, I would say it's if you have high level IQ, you're very smart. It's have you done something that you suck at and actually continued doing it until you started not sucking? One example is let's say maybe you weren't so good at physical fitness or sports.
Mm.
Were you able to make yourself good at sports? And I'll say if you're very intellectual, have high level intellect, but have not succeeded in doing something you sucked at and becoming good at it, maybe entrepreneurship will be hard for you.
Interesting. So, have you noticed that as a pattern? Why do you say that?
It's hopefully they're not watching this, but I would say my best for a lot of my friends in university.
Mm.
As I mentioned, I went to a university where people were much smarter than I was.
Mm-hmm.
IQ, I'll say IQ wise, or just the intellectual raw power. But I'll say so they had the horsepower,
Mm.
but I'll say I had the endurance.
Mm.
So maybe they were like a Mustang or something, but
Mhm.
maybe I'm the Prius.
Okay.
And so in terms of the distance traveled, I traveled much, much farther.
What are some practical steps that people can take so that they can find out what type of founder they are?
I think there might be something out there now.
Mm.
I'm not sure, but there are some personality tests that I forgot which one, but I would say in my case, I was I like to make changes in other people and in society,
Mm.
and so I think that makes sense for entrepreneurship. But yeah, so I don't have a good answer for resources for that.
No worries. So let me ask this then. There's a lot of challenges that can be solved in the world through businesses. How can someone know if they're the right person to pursue that specific business model?
Gotcha. This one is this is a nuanced question. I think there's several different person types at play. But
Mm.
let's say one is there's a problem that is very personal to you.
Mm.
Let's say one example, there's a guy who wanted to get, I think, neurological treatment for his child. It didn't exist.
Mm.
Even though he wasn't a doctor, he found a way to get funding
Mm.
to do the research for that particular one.
Mm.
So one is related to your personal situation where
Mm.
something happened to you, you feel let's say the current solutions in society what wasn't able to solve it.
Mm.
If you didn't do it, no one else would.
Mm.
I'll say that's one type.
Okay.
The second type is you just like helping people. And I think if you don't know exactly what you want to do, but you want to help other people, I think you could also get into entrepreneurship.
Mm.
And I think that's one, rather than trying to do something completely new,
Mm.
especially something that you know nothing about,
Mm.
probably best to stick to something that's already working, but
Mm.
just make it better.
Understood. Okay.
And similar to like our English language school and Japanese language school, those were not novel ideas, but we made it better.
Mm.
For I would say my third company, the advisory for revenue growth. Uh, I would say a lot of I technically could probably charge double what I charge, but I charged I'd say 16,500 yen
Mm.
to 20,000 yen, and the main reason was I wanted my clients to at a price where most people can afford and continue to do it long term, as opposed to just
Mm.
like a project based short term engagement.
It
And
seems like that's what your business model was even before with the first business. So it seems like that core element you use across all of your businesses. Is that correct?
yeah. So I'll say one unique thing about for me is I don't want to have this is a Japanese word, but do demo e business. And a do demo e or another way to say it is if your company were to not exist, who cares?
Mm.
And I'll say a lot of the founders out there, they do create a lot of businesses that, like at the end of the day, who cares?
Mm.
Meaning if they weren't existing, there would be another company who would feel solve their problem in the exact way that they solved it.
Mm.
So I like to create businesses that people think about like, I'm so glad this business exists.
Mm.
So with the first one, One Coin English, there wasn't an affordable English language learning platform out there.
Mm.
If you want to study English, you would probably be spending 10, maybe 12,000 yen a month for 4 hours.
Mm.
If you came to One Coin English, you could study for 4 to 5 hours
Mm.
for the same price.
Mm.
And so, as a school, if you really want your students to be fluent, they're not going to get fluent studying 1 hour a week
Mm.
for 12,000 yen.
Mm.
So we made it so people who wanted to study more could afford it.
Got
And
it.
so that's why we have fans.
How were you able to create businesses that were affordable yet still make you profitable?
That one is, I would say it's operational excellence. And what I mean by that is one is automating things that can be automated.
Mm.
Don't doing things that don't need to be done. And I think one is people would say certain things will cost a certain amount, but maybe there's another solution. But because they have that preconceived notion that it can't be done,
Mm.
I'd say their brain stops.
Mm.
And so I'll say the one reason that when COVID hit, we performed much better than everyone else at the same size as us. Our competitors had to close down, I think, 4 schools, 5 schools. Some closed down 8 schools.
Mm,
Some closed down 20 schools. We closed down one, the one that opened exactly the month of COVID.
mm,
But other than that, it's the reason was uh, just we were better managed. There's less waste
mm,
and better. So this is a hard question to answer, but I think, but I'll say that's also my strength and weakness.
mm.
My strength is that with very limited amount of funds and resources, I can do a lot.
How are you able to do that? Because a lot of people, when they're trying to start a business, they don't have a lot of money, they don't have a lot of time, they don't have a lot of connections. How are they able to be resourceful to build a successful business?
So this was something that kind of fell on. I would say there's a couple factors. One is growing up not rich. That's one. You have limited growing up with limited amount of resources. How to do what you have. I would say I was for where I came from, Hawaii. I was middle class, but uh, I've seen a lot of friends who have pretty much nothing
Mm,
and how they've been able to make by with that. But in my case, when I worked corporate, uh, as I mentioned, I had no budget. I'm
mm.
like, hey, I want to do this,
I
and it's
see.
like, there's no budget, so I had to put my own money. My head teachers, they put in their own money. Employees put in their own head money too. Let's say we didn't put a lot of money, but we put in a lot of money to make things better.
Got it.
And we didn't have a choice. We had the mission, we had the passion, but we didn't have the money. So
Mm,
we had to figure out a way to do it.
understood.
And similar to One Coin English, we don't charge as much as our competitors. We have to be able to do more with less.
I think that's very easy to say, but how does someone actually do that?
It's I think you just have to force you have to be put in that situation.
Mm,
And it's if you force yourself in that situation, most people you'll talk to, they'll say this is how much, they'll just have all these preset notions.
mm,
But it's this is actually a good insight. Uh, but rather than taking no, it could be, so their no could be might actually be correct, but might not actually be correct at this moment.
mm.
So let's say their no might have been correct 5 years ago, but might not actually be correct right now.
Can you expand upon that?
So a good example is, say, the typical response is, how do I find an employee?
Mm,
The typical answer would be use a job board.
mm,
But let's say you're a startup, you don't have money.
mm,
What are some alternatives to using a job board?
mm,
One, use Craigslist.
mm.
Uh, Two, I thought uh, I thought very carefully. Where would you get the best candidates? It's from other good candidates. So how can we get people to introduce their friends to our company?
Mm,
And I can't share how that one because that's I don't think anyone else has figured out to the extent that we have.
mm.
But those are two examples where the common answer would be just do a job board.
Got it. So it sounds like whatever the common answer is to challenge it. But how do you, does that mean that you should challenge everything then? How do you know what to challenge?
As a first time founder, you just have to do that trial and error.
Okay.
It's let's say it's kind of like muscle memory in a way. And so in my case, I kind of give that example where I'm not a Mustang, I'm not a Corvette, I'm
Mm,
probably a Prius or a Honda Civic.
mm,
But because I've traveled the most distance, I've seen the most things. I know how this terrain is. I know how to adapt to this terrain
got it.
because I've seen it before.
As a foreigner, what are the biggest challenges of starting a business in Japan?
I would say finding a really good co-founder is the biggest challenge. The reason for that is a co-founder ideally is someone who has the skills to do what their part of the job.
Mm,
The second one is even if you find someone who has that skill set, do they have the resilience? So if things aren't going well, are they going to panic, freak out?
mm,
Can they actually survive 6 months where, let's say, you're not making that much money?
mm.
In addition to that, do you have someone who's willing to give up a comfortable position? Let's say, so I'll say adventurous. Some of the So third point would be adventurousness. Do they have the adventurousness to dive into entrepreneurship where
Mm,
they don't need that comfortable job? They want to do something new. They like the challenge. They want to grow fast.
mm,
And then the fourth aspect is I forgot. And the fourth one is I'll say low ego.
yes, you mentioned that before.
And so and what I mean by that is with the first company, we grew really fast. We grew to about, I think, 200 employees in 6 years. And so basically, every 3 months, I had to do a rebirth in a
Mm,
way because we're growing so rapidly. And the mindset that worked 3 to 6 months ago doesn't work with this number of employees. And so, if you want to find a really good co founder, the ideal one has those four aspects of them. And
got it.
it's really hard to find someone. And like in my case, uh, I can I know a lot of really talented people, but who have the skills. Maybe they've even founded a company before. But let's say if they exited, maybe they're not adventurous anymore.
Mm,
Maybe they were just in it for more for the money,
mm,
possibly. Um, and so it's even people who have succeeded, do they still have those four aspects?
mm.
So it's really hard to find the right co-founder.
I mean, that does sound extremely difficult. If they can't find a good co-founder, should they just wait or start it on their own?
It's that's a good question. I would say if you're really really passionate about that idea, start it on your own. One is you're not as particular about the idea, but you want to go on that journey. You know that you don't want to be an employee. You want to be an
Mm,
entrepreneur. I'd also say start now.
mm,
But also if you want the comfort, you want more certainty, probably wait. Or and in that case, I would say you can wait, but what you need to have, let's say, a point of action. And what I mean by that is, at how much money do you have saved? At what level of skill or what position will you actually dive in?
mm,
If you if you do decide to wait, which is sometimes a good decision, you need to at least come up with what is the turning point.
mm,
And if you don't have kind of like a turning point, then you're just kind of wasting your time and you're just wasting other people's time.
mm. As the last question, how can people find that turning point?
It's I'll say the easiest one is what is your financial risk tolerance? So meaning do you need 1 month of 1 year of runway? In my case it was 2 years.
Mm,
And so I would say that's probably the easiest way.
understood. Perfect. Tyson, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Right. Pleasure.